A stormy night, a mansion lit like a palace, and a millionaire who thinks his wealth makes him untouchable. When he shoves his pregnant wife out into the raging storm, leaving her to freeze and fall, he believes no one will ever know. But she is not just another victim. She survives, and what comes next is a fight for truth, survival, and the kind of justice that money cannot buy. Trust me, you will not believe the way this story turns until we dive in together. Let us know the time you are watching and where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below and join the conversation. The storm had been building all evening, but no one inside the mansion thought it would reach this level of fury. Rain slammed against the tall glass windows, and wind clawed at the heavy drapes as if trying to rip them apart. The night sky cracked open with flashes of lightning that turned the polished marble floors into mirrors of white light. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled so deep that the walls seemed to tremble. Yet the greatest violence was not coming from nature. It was unfolding in the doorway of the grand hall. He stood there in his tailored black suit, a figure of wealth and authority. A man who had never once been told no in his life. His hand gripped the brass handle of the door so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. The veins in his temple pulsed as he shouted, his voice cutting through the roar of the storm like a whip. "Get out! Do you hear me? Get out of my house!" She froze, unable to believe what she was hearing. Her silk maternity dress clung to her body, soaked from tears and sweat, her hands instinctively protecting the curve of her swollen stomach. She tried to reason with him, her voice trembling, thin as glass. "Please, not tonight. I am carrying your child. You cannot throw me out in this storm." But his eyes were hard, unyielding. He had made up his mind. To him, she was no longer a wife, no longer a partner, only an obstacle. His jaw tightened, and he thrust his arm forward, the door swinging wide open to the chaos outside. Wind and rain burst in, lashing across the floor, chilling her to the bone. She staggered back as the gale tore at her hair, whipping it across her face. She looked once more at the man she had once trusted with her entire heart, hoping to see some flicker of mercy. Instead, his face twisted with contempt. He placed one hand firmly on her shoulder and shoved. The world tilted. Her legs buckled as she stumbled across the threshold. The polished floor gave way to the slick stone steps outside, and the force of the storm hit her full in the chest. She gasped, her arms wrapping protectively around her belly, her dress plastered against her body as the rain poured down. The heavy door slammed shut behind her, the sound booming like a final judgment. She was left alone on the steps, the mansion looming above her like a fortress, its golden lights burning coldly through the storm. She pounded on the door with her fist, desperate, terrified. "Please, open the door, I cannot survive this." No answer came. Inside, he had already turned his back, his footsteps echoing through the hall as though nothing had happened. To him, it was done. To her, it was the beginning of something far more dangerous. She slipped on the wet stone, falling hard onto her knees. Pain shot through her body. She cried out, clutching her stomach, praying the life within her was unharmed. The storm howled as if mocking her weakness. Each drop of rain stung her skin like needles. Lightning split the sky, illuminating her figure on the steps, small and fragile against the fury of nature. For a moment she thought she might faint. Her vision blurred, and she tasted salt and iron on her lips. The baby kicked inside her, a reminder that she had more than herself to fight for. She dragged herself upright, her hair streaming down her face, her body trembling with cold and fear. No one passing by on the deserted road would believe the scene. A millionaire, admired by society, had just shoved his pregnant wife into the teeth of a storm, and no one behind those gates could hear her cries above the crashing thunder. Her eyes locked on the iron fence at the edge of the property. She would have to move, to survive, to find help. But as she staggered forward, one truth cut sharper than the wind. The man she had loved, the father of her child, had abandoned her to die. And the storm was only beginning. The storm had swallowed her whole. Each gust of wind tore at her body, but the greater weight pressed down inside her chest. The door was closed. The man she had trusted was gone, and the world outside the mansion offered no mercy. Her hands trembled as she tried to wipe the rain from her eyes, but it was useless. The water fell faster than she could push it away. She stumbled to the side of the steps, gripping the iron railing for support. The cold of the metal seeped into her palm, but it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her dress clung heavily to her, dragging her down, the soaked fabric plastered against her legs. Her hair whipped around her face, strands sticking to her lips as she gasped for breath. In her mind, fragments of the past flickered, the same steps where he once carried her over the threshold with promises of forever. The same doorway where they had laughed together after long nights out. The same walls that once echoed with music and warmth. Now those memories mocked her, their sweetness turned sour, poisoned by betrayal. The rain blurred everything, but one image refused to fade. His face, hard and cold, as he pushed her out, his hand on her shoulder, not tender but merciless. The slam of the door had not just shut her outside, it had slammed shut the illusion of love, of safety, of family. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the wet ground, hugging her stomach. A sharp pain shot through her side, and panic rose like fire in her throat. She whispered to the child within her, her voice breaking, "Hold on, please, hold on, Mama is here." She pressed her forehead against her knees, shaking, shivering. The world was roaring around her, but inside she clung to a fragile thread of hope. Behind the mansion walls, she imagined the silence, chandeliers still glowing, carpets still plush underfoot, servants moving quietly, careful not to disturb the master. He would be sipping his drink, maybe even smiling, convinced that power and wealth gave him the right to discard her. The contrast cut deep, like a knife twisting. Inside, warmth and indifference. Outside, pain and abandonment. Her fingers traced the ring that still clung to her hand. The diamond caught a faint flash of lightning, sparkling for a moment before the storm swallowed the light again. She remembered the night he had slipped it onto her finger. He had promised protection, devotion, eternity. Now the ring felt heavy, almost mocking. She wanted to tear it off, but her strength was fading. The storm paused for a brief second, as if gathering its breath. The sudden lull made her hear the small, fragile sound of her own sobs. Her chest heaved, each breath shallow and uneven. She felt the stone steps digging into her knees, her palms scraped raw against the ground, yet none of it hurt as much as the emptiness opening inside her. The voices of the past whispered in her head, her mother's warning, friends who had asked if she was sure about marrying him. She had silenced them all with faith, with love, with hope that he would never harm her. And now here she was, a shadow of herself, drenched and shivering in the storm, carrying a life that deserved more than this cruelty. Another flash of lightning illuminated the sky, and for a moment she saw her reflection in the rain puddle at her feet. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her lips were pale. Her eyes, once filled with dreams, looked haunted. She almost did not recognize the woman staring back at her. The storm roared again, wind whipping the trees into wild shapes, but something inside her shifted. The devastation was real, the pain unbearable, yet deep beneath it a stubborn ember began to glow. She could not let him destroy her. She could not let the child inside her pay for his sins. She pulled herself to her feet, wavering, gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. Each step was slow, each movement a battle, but she refused to collapse again. The storm would not end soon, and neither would the fight ahead. Her lips parted, and though the words were stolen by the wind, they carried the promise of resistance. This is not the end. And with that, she moved forward, out into the storm, away from the mansion that had betrayed her, toward a future she could not yet see, but was determined to claim. The storm battered her body, but another storm raged inside her mind. Each step forward dragged more memories out of the shadows. Memories she had tried to bury. She had wanted to believe that her husband's distance was caused by work pressure, by the endless demands of investors and board meetings. Yet the truth had been whispering to her for weeks, even months. And tonight, under the howl of the wind, she could no longer silence it. She remembered the night she had gone to his office, quietly, carrying a tray of food. He had been late again, locked behind the thick oak door. She had hesitated, balancing the tray against her hip, listening to the muffled sound of his voice. At first, she thought he was on a call with a client, but then she heard the softness in his tone, the way his voice dropped into an intimacy he had not shown her in a long time. Her heart had stopped when she heard the words, "Once she is gone, everything will belong to us. The estate, the accounts, even the company shares. You only need to wait." She had nearly dropped the tray, her knees turning to water. She had pressed her back against the wall, breathing as quietly as she could. Every word after that cut deeper. the sound of his laugh, the way he whispered another woman's name, the promise of a life that did not include her or the child she carried. She had fled that night without confronting him. Her hands had shaken so badly she could not even hold a glass of water. She had told herself it might be a misunderstanding. Maybe he had been drunk. Maybe it was business talk twisted by her own fears. She had convinced herself not to look too closely because she did not want to see the cracks spreading through her marriage. But then came the late-night texts he tried to hide, the sudden business trips, the perfume on his shirt that was not hers. Each piece stacked onto the others until denial could no longer hold the weight. Still, she clung to hope. She wanted to believe that when the baby came, he would change. She wanted to believe that the man she married still existed under the polished mask of wealth and arrogance. Tonight destroyed that illusion. His shove into the storm, his cold eyes, his silence behind the locked door, all of it confirmed what she had overheard. She was never meant to be part of his future. She had been a stepping stone, a useful partner, until he found someone more exciting, someone who could feed his greed and flatter his ego. The rain stung her skin, but the betrayal stung more. Her lips trembled as she whispered to herself, replaying his words. Once she is gone, gone. He had spoken of her disappearance not as a tragedy, not as a crime, but as a calculation, a step in his plan, a door he needed to close so he could move forward. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, protecting the life inside her. Tears mixed with the rain as she realized the depth of his cruelty. He had not only betrayed her as a wife, he had endangered their child, a child who had never asked to be born into this nightmare. A crack of thunder shook the ground, and she forced herself to keep moving, her body numb from cold but her mind burning with clarity. She could no longer afford illusions. The truth was laid bare. The man she had married was gone, replaced by someone who saw her only as an obstacle to his empire. Her teeth chattered as she whispered again, not to him, but to herself and to the child within her. He will not win. Not this time. Not with us. The storm roared in agreement, a furious witness to the lies that had been exposed, and with every step, her grief turned into something sharper. It was not only survival that pushed her forward now, it was the seed of defiance, born in the ashes of betrayal. The storm raged louder, swallowing every trace of comfort. She clutched her stomach as if her arms could shield the child inside from the merciless cold. Her feet slipped on the wet stones, each step heavier than the last. The mansion loomed behind her, tall and indifferent, its golden windows glowing like eyes that had chosen to look away. She turned back once, hoping for the impossible. She prayed the door might open again, that he might appear with regret on his face. But the door remained closed. Inside, he moved with certainty, pouring himself a drink, shaking droplets of rain from his sleeve as if nothing had happened. He had done what he wanted. In his mind, she was out of sight. And soon, she would be out of mind. The storm was his accomplice, a ruthless partner that would erase the evidence of his cruelty. She reached the bottom of the steps and collapsed onto her knees. The stone bit into her skin, but she barely felt it. Her breath came in short gasps, her chest rising and falling in desperate rhythm. Pain flared in her side, sharp and unforgiving, and terror gripped her heart. She pressed her palm against her belly, whispering to the child, "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." Lightning split the sky, and for a moment the world was bathed in white light. Her reflection glimmered in a puddle, distorted and broken. She hardly recognized herself, a drenched figure trembling in the night, her face streaked with tears and rain. Above her, the mansion's lights burned steady, unshaken by the storm. They mocked her suffering, casting a cruel contrast between the warmth inside and the chaos outside. She thought of the vows once spoken within those walls, promises of protection and loyalty. Now they were lies buried beneath greed. The sound of an engine roared behind her. She turned her head in time to see the sleek black car pull away from the garage, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. Her husband sat behind the wheel, his profile calm, almost elegant, as if he were leaving for nothing more than a late meeting. For a fleeting second, their eyes met through the glass. She searched for humanity, for hesitation, for anything that might prove he still cared. She found nothing. The car surged forward, tires hissing against the flooded driveway. The red glow of the taillights faded into the storm until only darkness remained. He had abandoned her fully, choosing the road ahead and leaving her to the mercy of wind and water. Her body trembled violently, a mixture of fear and cold. She tried to stand, her fingers clawing at the slick railing, but her knees buckled again. The weight of the storm pushed her down, forcing her to face the cruel truth. He had not simply left her behind. He had sentenced her to survive or die alone. A sob tore from her throat, swallowed instantly by the wind. She pushed herself upright, staggering forward into the storm. Each step felt like a battle against an unseen hand, pressing her backward. The rain blurred her vision, but she pressed on, guided by sheer instinct. Somewhere ahead there had to be shelter. Somewhere beyond the storm there had to be a chance. She thought of the words she had overheard, the whispered promises to another woman. Once she is gone. Those words echoed in her skull with each step. They were no longer just words. They were prophecy. Tonight he had tried to make them real, but she refused to let them define her. Her lips moved soundlessly as she spoke to the child inside her, her voice barely audible over the storm. "He will not take us. He will not break us. We will live." The storm screamed louder, tearing at her dress, freezing her skin, but she forced herself onward. Behind her, the mansion disappeared into the sheets of rain. Ahead of her, nothing could be seen. Yet she walked forward anyway, because forward was the only choice left. The storm showed no mercy. Wind clawed at her body, pulling her dress tight against her skin until it felt like another chain. Rain poured down with such force that each drop struck like a stone. The night was endless, black and furious, yet inside her chest, a single rhythm demanded she continue. The small heartbeat beneath her own, the fragile life inside her, refused to let her surrender. She staggered along the gravel path, her shoes slipping in mud that sucked at her steps. Her arms wrapped protectively around her belly, each movement slow, each breath ragged. Her lips were numb, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes stinging from water and tears. She whispered through chattering teeth, speaking not to herself but to the child she carried. "Stay strong, please, my love. We will make it through this night." The wind answered with a howl so fierce that she stumbled sideways. Her body struck against a tree trunk, the bark scraping her shoulder. Pain seared through her arm, but she clung to the trunk as if it were the only anchor in a drowning sea. She pressed her cheek to the rough wood and let herself breathe for a moment, steadying the pounding in her chest. A crack of thunder shook the sky, followed by the violent crash of a branch breaking free. It slammed to the ground not far from her, spraying dirt and leaves across her legs. The shock jolted her forward, forcing her to move again. She knew standing still was more dangerous than moving. If she stopped, the cold would steal her strength. If she collapsed, she might never rise again. She trudged onward, her bare feet finally abandoning the ruined shoes. The mud was icy and unforgiving, sucking between her toes, but at least it held her upright. Her breath came in ragged bursts, each one visible in the flashes of lightning that lit the storm. She could feel her body weakening, yet inside her mind she clung to one vision. She imagined holding her child, warm and safe, far from this night. That vision became her rope, pulling her forward when her muscles begged her to fall. She whispered again, her voice faint but fierce. "I promise you, I will not let him win. You will be born. You will live." The words carried her farther than her legs could on their own. The path blurred into the storm, and she lost her bearings. Her body twisted, her knees buckling, and she collapsed into the mud. The cold seeped into her skin, stealing her breath. For a moment she lay there, eyes closed, surrender tempting her. The weight of betrayal pressed on her as heavily as the rain. She thought of his face, calm and cruel behind the wheel of his car, driving away without looking back. But then she felt it, a kick inside her belly, small, sharp, defiant. Her eyes flew open. She gasped, clutching her stomach, and tears streamed down her face. "You are fighting too," she whispered. "You are telling me not to give up." Ugh. Strength returned in a rush, not enough to banish the pain, but enough to make her rise. She pushed her palms into the mud, forcing her trembling body upright. She swayed but remained standing. The child within her had spoken in the only way it could, and she had heard. She moved forward again, step by step, her body broken but her spirit alight. The storm shrieked around her, but she no longer heard only its cruelty. She heard the promise of survival. She heard the echo of her own voice declaring that this night would not take her. Lightning split the sky once more, and she pressed on into the darkness, determined to find shelter, determined to live, determined to carry her child beyond the reach of the man who had tried to destroy them both. The storm had begun to blur into a single roar, an endless wall of sound that pressed against her ears until even her own heartbeat seemed faint. Her body swayed with each step, and her vision dimmed. She thought she might collapse again, and this time she would not rise. Then, just as the night seemed ready to swallow her completely, a light pierced the darkness. It was small at first, a faint glow through the sheets of rain. She blinked, certain it was only her mind playing tricks. But the glow grew brighter, steady, unshaken by the storm. The low rumble of an engine followed, closer with each second. She lifted her head, tears mingling with the rain, and whispered, "Please, let it be real." A truck pulled onto the roadside, headlights cutting through the chaos. The tires hissed against the wet ground, sending water spraying. The vehicle slowed, then stopped. The door creaked open, and a figure jumped down, moving quickly toward her. She tried to step back, but her body had no strength left. Her legs trembled, and she would have fallen if not for the strong arms that caught her. "You are freezing," the man's voice said firmly. His coat smelled of rain and smoke. His hands were calloused but gentle as he wrapped the heavy fabric around her shoulders. "Do not speak. You are safe now." Her lips quivered. She tried to form words, to explain, to apologize for being nothing more than a burden on this dark road, but only a choked sob escaped her throat. He tightened the coat around her and guided her toward the truck. Each step was steady now, his arm supporting her, carrying the weight she could no longer hold. Inside the cab, warmth surrounded her. The heater blasted against her skin, and the sudden change made her shiver harder, as if her body was only now allowed to feel the depth of its exhaustion. The man handed her a flask of warm liquid. She pressed it to her lips, the heat sliding down her throat, shocking her back to life. "You are going to be fine," he said, his eyes focused on the road as he pulled the truck forward again. "I will take you to the hospital. They will take care of you and your baby." At the mention of the baby, she clutched her stomach. Fear rippled through her. What if the storm had done more damage than she could bear? What if her child had suffered because of his cruelty? She closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer that the small heartbeat inside her was still strong. The man must have seen the terror in her face. His voice softened. "You are not alone anymore. Whatever you have been through, it ends tonight." The words sank deep into her, warming her more than the heater could. She leaned back against the seat, still trembling, but a new sense of relief began to settle over her. She had not been abandoned to the storm after all. Fate, or perhaps something greater, had placed this stranger in her path. The hospital lights appeared in the distance, glowing like a promise. Her eyelids grew heavy, but she refused to let sleep take her until she knew. As the truck pulled into the emergency entrance, nurses rushed forward, opening the door, lifting her gently onto a stretcher. The man stepped back, watching silently, his presence steady like a shield. As they wheeled her inside, she turned her head toward him one last time. Her voice was barely audible, but her gratitude filled every syllable. "Thank you," he nodded once, firm and calm. "You are safe, but this is only the beginning." And in that moment, though the storm still raged outside, she felt the first spark of rebirth inside her. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of the monitor beside her bed. Each pulse of sound carried reassurance, proof that the child inside her was still alive. The storm had left her body bruised and exhausted, but it had not taken what mattered most. She lay there with her hands over her stomach, listening to the small heartbeat that reminded her she had a reason to keep fighting. When the doctor entered, his voice was calm but firm. "You and your baby are stable, but you need to rest. Stress and exposure like that could have ended differently. You were very lucky tonight." She nodded, though luck was not what she felt. Survival had come through pain, betrayal, and the hand of a stranger who refused to leave her behind. As the door closed, she turned her gaze to the man who had rescued her. He stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the rain streak down the glass. "You did not have to stop for me," she whispered, her voice hoarse. He turned, his eyes steady. Everyone deserves to be saved, but you need more than saving. You need to be heard. Men like him think they can bury the truth. Do you have proof? The word proof struck her like a spark. She remembered the recordings, the messages she had seen on his phone, the conversations whispered behind closed doors. She had evidence, pieces of a puzzle she had been too afraid to put together. Until now, her breath trembled as she sat up straighter. I do. I have recordings, documents, enough to show what he has done, enough to show what he planned for me. The man's expression did not change, but his voice grew firm. Then you must use them. He wanted you gone because you are stronger than he could admit. If you keep silent, he wins. If you speak, he falls. The words filled her chest with a new kind of fire. For the first time since the night began, she was no longer thinking only of survival. She was thinking of justice. She imagined him at the mansion, calm and smug, believing she was lost to the storm. The thought of his confidence made her lips tighten. That false security would be her greatest weapon. She asked for her belongings, and the nurses brought her bag, still damp from the rain. She reached inside, pulling out her phone. The screen flickered, water damaged but still functional. With trembling fingers, she unlocked it and scrolled through the files she had saved. Recordings of his voice, words spoken in secrecy, screenshots of messages to his mistress, copies of documents he thought she would never see. She laid them out on the bedside table, as if they were weapons in a quiet war. The man watched silently, then leaned closer. This is enough. With a lawyer, with the press, with the right timing, he cannot escape. You must choose when to strike. Her heart pounded as she imagined the courtroom, the flashing cameras, the silence breaking when the truth was revealed. She imagined him pale and speechless, the world watching his empire collapse. The vision gave her strength she had not felt in years. She closed her eyes for a moment, placing her hands over her stomach. He thinks I am gone. He thinks I am finished. That is his mistake. The man nodded once, his expression firm. Then we begin planning. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we start. As she drifted into sleep, her mind no longer clung only to survival. It clung to purpose. The storm had not ended her. It had remade her. She would return, not as the broken wife he had tried to discard, but as the woman who would bring his empire to its knees. The courtroom buzzed with quiet chatter, the kind of restless energy that built before something monumental. Lawyers shuffled papers, journalists adjusted their cameras, and spectators leaned forward, waiting for the spectacle they had been promised. At the center of it all sat the millionaire, polished and composed in his expensive suit, his hands folded neatly on the table. He looked every bit the picture of control. Inside, he carried certainty. His wife was gone. The storm had erased her. Even if she had survived, she would never dare to show her face again. He believed the path ahead was clear, that his charm and wealth would silence every question. He leaned back in his chair, smirking as the judge entered the room. Then the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, and a wave of whispers spread like fire. Phones lifted into the air, their screens glowing as they recorded every second. For a heartbeat, the millionaire did not understand. Then his eyes followed the stares of the crowd. His smirk froze, his face draining of color. She walked in slowly, every step deliberate. The sound of her heels echoed against the marble floor. She wore a dress of deep navy blue, elegant but strong, her posture straight, her chin lifted. In her arms, she held the evidence of survival. The child within her belly, still safe, still alive. The cameras flashed, illuminating her face. Gone was the image of a broken woman cast into the storm. Before them stood someone unyielding, someone who had endured the night and risen stronger. The silence in the courtroom cracked into a roar of voices. The millionaire's lawyer leaned toward him in a panic, whispering, but he could not hear. His pulse thundered in his ears. He had convinced himself she was finished. Now she was here, alive, radiant, and carrying more power than he could have imagined. She stopped at the center of the room and lifted her eyes to meet his. For a moment, the storm returned between them, silent but fierce. He looked at her with disbelief, and she looked at him with resolve. No tears, no pleading, only certainty. The judge struck the gavel, demanding order, but the energy in the room refused to calm. Reporters scrambled for the best angle, their cameras clicking like drums. The words spread across the gallery. She survived. She is here. He lied. Number 1. She stepped forward to the witness stand, laying down a folder of documents with steady hands. Papers slid across the wood, their edges sharp under the fluorescent lights. She lifted her voice, clear and unwavering. "You thought I was gone, but I am here, and I bring the truth." The lawyer tried to object, but the words were drowned by the rustle of the crowd. The judge gestured for silence. All eyes turned back to her. She continued, her voice steady as stone. "I was cast out into the storm. I was left to die with the child I carry. But I lived. And now everyone will know what he planned." She opened the folder, revealing documents, recordings, messages, every piece of evidence she had guarded. The millionaire shifted in his chair, his jaw clenched, his palms sweating against the polished surface of the table. His confidence shattered with each word she spoke. The crowd leaned closer, their faces lit by the glow of their phones, recording, sharing, amplifying her voice. What had once been a private act of cruelty had become a public reckoning. And as she stood there, unwavering, the storm outside faded, leaving only the storm she had brought into the courtroom, a storm that would not be silenced. The courtroom had become a stage, and the spotlight no longer belonged to the millionaire. Every eye was fixed on the woman who had survived the storm and returned with proof. She stood tall, her hands steady as she placed recordings and documents before the judge. Each piece was a stone laid carefully into the wall of truth, closing around the man who had once believed himself untouchable. The first recording played, her husband's voice unmistakable. "Once she is gone, everything will belong to us." His tone was casual, almost careless, as if the life of his pregnant wife had been nothing more than a minor obstacle in his plans. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge's brow furrowed, and the jury exchanged glances heavy with disgust. The millionaire shifted in his chair, his confident mask beginning to crack. His lawyer rose, objecting loudly, but the judge silenced him with a single sharp strike of the gavel. "Sit down, the evidence will be heard." Oh. More documents followed, copies of bank transfers, secret agreements, and hidden messages. His mistress was named, her involvement exposed. Screenshots of their private conversations lit up on the monitors for all to see. Each message confirmed betrayal, greed, and intent to destroy the woman who now stood against him. His face turned pale, sweat breaking across his forehead. He grabbed a glass of water with shaking hands, but even that betrayed him as it clattered against his teeth. For the first time, the audience saw not a powerful man but a frightened figure stripped of his illusions. The reporters whispered to one another, their voices rising with excitement. "His empire is finished. This will be tomorrow's headline." Cameras clicked like a swarm of locusts, recording every second of his collapse. The humiliation he had once inflicted was now mirrored back onto him, multiplied by the eyes of the world. His mistress, seated near the back, tried to rise and leave. Security blocked her path. The judge demanded she remain, her testimony required. Her face flushed red as the messages she had written appeared on the screens. "Do not worry. Once she is out of the way, we will have everything." Her words, once whispered in secrecy, now echoed through the chamber for all to hear. The millionaire slammed his fist against the table. "This is not true. You cannot prove any of this." His voice cracked, desperation bleeding into every syllable. But the proof lay inches from his hand, undeniable and sharp as a blade. The judge leaned forward, voice heavy with authority. "You planned to abandon your wife and unborn child to secure wealth. You endangered both lives. And now the evidence speaks louder than your words." The man's shoulders slumped. The weight of power he had once carried so easily now pressed down on him like chain. His lawyer whispered frantically, but his eyes were blank, his mind collapsing under the reality of his own exposure. In the gallery, the tide shifted. Where once there might have been admiration, now there was contempt. Former allies exchanged knowing looks. Business partners slipped away, already preparing to distance themselves. The empire he had built with arrogance was crumbling in real time, and he could do nothing to stop it. The woman watched quietly, her hands folded in front of her. She did not gloat. She did not shout. Her silence spoke louder than any words. She had survived what he believed would destroy her, and in doing so, she had turned his power against him. The gavel struck again, calling for order, but the damage was done. The reversal was complete. The millionaire who once stood above the world now sat in chains of evidence. his voice silenced by the truth he had tried so hard to bury. The trial ended with the sound of the gavel echoing through the courtroom. The judge's words were clear and final. The millionaire was guilty of abuse, endangerment, and fraud. His assets were frozen, his reputation was shattered. His allies had abandoned him, leaving him alone in the place where he once believed he was invincible. He sat slumped in his chair, his once flawless suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. The woman who had endured the storm did not look at him as the guards led him away. She did not need to. His fate was sealed, and her gaze was fixed forward. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment she rose to her feet. For months, she had been seen as the victim, the abandoned wife, the fragile figure cast out into the rain. Now she stood taller, no longer defined by what he had done, but by what she had overcome. Outside the courthouse, the steps were crowded with reporters and supporters. Microphones reached toward her, and the questions came like a flood. How did you survive? What will you do next? What message do you have for other women? She paused, her hand resting gently on her stomach, where the child within her still thrived. The noise faded into a hush as her voice rose above the crowd. I survived because I refused to give up. I survived because I believed my child deserved more than silence. No one should have the power to discard another human being as if their life means nothing. Today, justice has spoken. Today, we begin again. The applause that followed was not the thunder of a storm, but the steady rhythm of support. Strangers who had never met her wiped tears from their eyes. Women in the crowd held their children tighter. Men who had once admired the millionaire lowered their heads in shame. The tide had turned fully, and her story had become a banner of truth. In the weeks that followed, the transformation continued. She signed the papers that severed her marriage completely, each signature a release from years of control. She reclaimed her name, her identity, and her freedom. The empire he had tried to protect crumbled in courtrooms and boardrooms, while she began building something new. She established a foundation dedicated to protecting women and children from abuse. The first funds came from the frozen accounts of the man who had once tried to erase her. His wealth, once a weapon, became the seed of something that would outlive him. At the opening ceremony, she stood on a stage, her child in her arms, her voice steady as she declared, "No one will ever silence us again." Her days were no longer filled with fear, but with purpose. She surrounded herself with allies who had once been strangers. Lawyers, advocates, doctors, and survivors gathered at her side. The mansion that once trapped her became irrelevant. What mattered now was the future she was shaping with her child. At night, when the world was quiet, she sometimes remembered the storm. She remembered the rain on her skin, the sound of the door slamming, the ache of betrayal. But she also remembered the light of the truck headlights, the warmth of a stranger's coat, the steady beat of her baby's heart. Those memories reminded her that even in the darkest night, there had been signs that she was never truly alone. One evening, standing by the window with her newborn cradled in her arms, she whispered softly, "We made it." The child stirred, safe and warm against her chest. Outside, the sky was clear, the stars bright, the storm long gone. Her story had begun in betrayal and violence, but it ended in strength and renewal. No amount of wealth or cruelty could erase the truth. She had turned pain into power, and she had proved that no storm could silence a woman determined to rise.